Alright guys, miss me? It's been a while. I'll tell you all about that in the description below. But right now, we're in New York City in Chinatown today. And this is going to get exciting now. We're going to be doing the Gantry. The Gantry is the part that makes the VZbot a VZbot. The whole idea behind the VZbot is the Gantry being light. As I said in part 1 of the series, but why do I want to print a bench sheet in 5 minutes that looks like doo-doo, huh? Well, you don't. These are the test pods out there. These are the guys testing the configurations, testing out, you know, everything to make a 3D printer go faster than 100 milliseconds so you don't have to, okay? These guys are pushing the limits. They're trying new hardware out. They're experimenting with the numbers in the firmware. They're trying out everything to make this thing go faster, so if you're able to print later on something at half the speed instead of, like, you know, 5 minutes, so you can actually get a two-hour part, and it takes 2 hours to print it. Imagine being able to cut that down to about half. That's a huge time saver right there. These guys are the guys who are help pushing that movement to go faster and better. So even shaving off just like 5 to 15 minutes off an hour print, that's a huge difference. You know, like that can make a world difference, you know, going from like 8 hours to about like 5 hours. I don't know, I'm doing my math backwards, but you know what I'm saying. Every little bit counts, and the bigger and longer your print is, the more quickly you want to get done, because the law of averages is if you're printing for a week, something may happen at the very last hour. You don't want that. There's a plethora of different size screws on this part of the build, so don't get caught without the right size. But everything else is pretty much straightforward and easy. You can do this pretty easily. Not a big deal, but you need to have all the right screws and parts. It's a pretty simple build. I'm back. Okay, remember when I talked about my aluminum sheet when I was scratching it up by accident? I wasn't worried about it. Well, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna first clean it off with some isopropyl alcohol, which is just basically rubbing alcohol. And I'm gonna wipe all the dust, fingerprint, and grease from my fingertips off of this. And then I'm going to put a filament spring sheet plate on this here. It's a magnetic bed. All right, so what we're gonna do is gonna put the magnetic part down. Super easy. We don't have to worry about bubbles and popping things and getting it perfectly. I'm gonna show you how. Okay, so first we've got the sheet over here. Okay, and this is the sheet, and here's the magnetic part. So you don't have to scrape the bubbles out, because the way I do it is I peel off one side, and then the other side I attach to the spring sheet. So it's one solid piece. Okay, just like this, watch. Okay, so when I put it down, right, I'm trying to get everything nice and level, even on the edges, using my fingertips to feel, lowering it down, making sure it's level, and not level, but, you know, like aligned properly. I pinch the corners to make sure. I look at it carefully, lower it down carefully, and then when I'm ready, I just let it go. It's gonna be flat as it is. I just rub the top, push it down a little bit, just like this. And once that's done, this sheet is on. Now that's the texture side, and the other side is the smooth side of the sheet. So yeah, this is perfect. No bubbles, no bumps, no nothing. So bada bing, bada boom, snap, done. Okay, let's talk about the gantries. Get all your pieces together. Some pieces may look alike, so be careful when you're printing these so you don't make duplicates of like the left side only and not the right, because the right and the left are mirrored and they look very much alike. So make sure you have the parts printed correctly, especially if you're taking apart your printer and you have to, like, you have no printer. No good. All right, so these things are pretty cool because, like bulldogs, they bite from the top and the bottom. They have multiple V-nuts to make sure it's secure. You want to make sure you have the right amount of screws, because if you're not, you're going to be short and you have to order and you have to wait. No delays. I've said this a million times. Always have the right screws. Now, the normal one that comes with the tronxy is these plexiglass ones, and they only got 2 holes. Not very good because they're pretty weak. They can snap, and another thing I hate is this piece of paper that people never peel off. How many printers have you seen out there with that brown piece of paper that takes 2 seconds to peel off? Now, these things can snap if you tighten the belt too much. You can see the 2 screws mount over here, and that's all it has. You put the 2 screws there, and the 4 screws in the motors, and that's it. Tighten that belt up, it can go snap. Now, as I said about screws, I go overboard. If I need 8 screws, I buy 20. If I need 4 screws, I buy as many as I can, because screws are very important, especially once you get above the size 15 millimeters, they get more rare that you have them. You can get the 10 and 5s and whatever and unders easier, but these are a lot harder to acquire. So I want to have a collection of screws. Now, these 2 motors over here, side by side, I hate the one with the wires. Why? Because if I have to mod these wires, I have to use shrink tubing and make it look really ugly and loose. Versus this, I can stick a ribbon, or I can make a nice cable and custom length it pretty easily. And if this thing goes wrong with the cable, I can swap it out. Now, let's assemble this. First, you put the 2 screws over here on top. Okay, and once you do that, you're gonna secure this piece to the bottom, well, not the bottom, the underside of the top frame extrusions, so you can place them correctly. If you screw these pieces together, you cannot do that because you have to take it apart. Then you're gonna put your pulley here, over here, and you wanna make sure this is tight. I have an issue with these gears that uses grub nuts and things like that, and I'll get into this later on. I have a feeling that this can introduce some sort of like wobble because it's so loose. All right, so let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we wanna make sure these V-nuts are aligned properly so they can slip in. You want to make sure that you can actually get them in and they lock into place, because sometimes they'll just spin around and they don't grab on. So you want to make sure these screws and nuts are fully extended and then squeezed down. And you can actually feel the nuts tightening onto the extrusion. So once you do that, you start doing all the screws, make sure they're all in, because you may have a failed one that didn't lock in. So you want to unscrew it and then re-screw it back in until it grabs onto the extrusion. Once you do that, you can get ready for the second part, which is putting the top part on. And the top part goes on the top, and you make sure all the V-nuts are aligned. Put them down, and then start tightening up the nuts. Okay, so tighten up a few just to make sure you got a good grip. Once you got a good grip in there, then you can put the long screws, which would be screw number 3 and 4 for the motors. So you have 4 screws in the motor. Screw colors don't make a difference, as long as it holds everything together. Another thing, that I see out there are the CNC version of these things. They're great, they're super tight, they will not fail you whatsoever, but will they increase your speed? No. They're a bit of a bling if you want. You can print your own, or you get the CNC if you have the extra cash, just to make your printer look fancy, but otherwise, they are not needed to make it a high-speed printer. All right, so now I'm gonna put the other side on. Now, I, for some reason, had an error filming how I put the pulleys on this, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Again, just put those on top of the other piece and just look at the manual. There's no gotchas here, it's pretty easy. Just make sure you just have the pulleys in the right direction, One is geared, goes one way, and the smooth one goes another way. We'll look at the manual, it'll show you, it's pretty clear. Okay, so now you tighten these up all the way as much as you can, and make sure nothing is gonna come loose. All right, so then you tighten the bottom ones, and you're gonna be pretty good to go with these over here. And once you do all 4, you're gonna be ready to do the next step. And the next step is gonna be putting the X-axis on and things like that, and the belts and all electronics. So, just double check your work, before you get finalized over here, and make sure everything's right. If you're putting a screw, what I do is I put the nut underneath and I hold it with my finger, and then I kind of finger tight till it grabs onto it. Once it grabs onto it, you know, then I start tightening it. Okay, so just tighten it, and once that's good, you're gonna be good to go. And that's pretty much it for the gantry parts here, the 4 motor parts. As I said before, weight is the main factor over here. Now, if this is the standard tronxy Pro, it has this heavy bar, has these heavy metal pulleys, very heavy, extremely heavy. The whole thing behind the VZbot is making it ultra light. Just this one part alone is 58 grams. Put that in there. That's 773 grams. You know, that's a lot of weight to be slinging around on the top part, not including the other side bits too that you have. You have, that's just the one pulley. There's about 2 more pulleys to go. So you want to be aware of that. There are certain times where you don't really care, like previously on the gantry, you don't really care if it's CNC or if it's plastic or whatever, because those parts are moving, you know. But now here is the other part that I'm using here, that's 59 grams, and that's 220 versus 700 and something. So that's already over 500 grams of weight savings right there. Okay, so remember, this is 589, and this was just 188. Almost, that one part is almost weighs as much as my carbon fiber X-rod and rail. Okay, so these things are solid, as you can see. They're solid aluminum. You know, they're not hollow like this. This is the hollow one. Hang on a second. Let me just redo this here. Take it off. Let me zero it out and put it back on. Okay. So if you're using this one over here, that's 73 grams. Okay. Versus the other one, and this is only 19 grams. Still a huge difference using the carbon fiber. Okay. Let's talk about this over here. That's only 10 grams. Okay. The plastic part is going to be a total of 16 grams, a total savings of 5 grams per side. In the end, 10 grams. Okay, here I was thinking I lost the clips for the Y gantry, but I've got a couple of screws over here. I'm going to show you how to put this thing together. It's pretty simple. What you do is, I'm going to show you the one that I already did. Notice the gear is on top, and where the VZbot logo is, that's the top part. So doesn't really make a difference. I'm just showing you so you know the difference. They're both equally hold on both sides. But anyway, so first we need a washer. I'm going to put a washer on the bottom of this, and you also need a spacer. So spacer goes in first. The geared pulley goes up here, and then you put the spacer in between that and the Y gantry. Hold it steady because it gets kind of tricky here. And then we're going to get the screw. And once we get it all lined up, we put the screw through, and then we put the nut on top of it. All right, so we get this nut, and we're going to just turn it finger tight for now. You know, we'll tighten it up in a minute. And if you notice, one side's going to be a geared washer, and the other one's going to be just a pulley. And then it's going to be the opposite for the opposite side. Okay, so we put the screw in, then we get the washer, then we get the pulley, and then we get the spacer. Okay, where's the space? Here it is. Spacer goes in here, and you have to kind of bend your screw a little bit so you can get it on, and once you get it on, you put it through, and then again, you put the nut. And that's pretty much it. And so now you have two of these things, and you're gonna put one on the left side and one on the right side. How do these connect? You probably want to, don't make these too tight because you want these things to roll. So I'm gonna put these screws in the back first, and then I'm gonna put that connected to a spacer in a minute. So put the screws in first, and you need a total of 4 small screws. In the meantime, I'm gonna get these blocks over here. These are gonna go on the X-side CNC rod, and they have some holes here. In case it doesn't fit properly, it's too tight, what you're gonna do is you're gonna get some sandpaper and you're gonna sand it down. Okay, just a little bit. You don't want to sand it too much, just enough for a tight fit. So you're gonna get both sides, left and right, get it nice and even, give it a couple of rubs, and then stick it in to see if that fits, and it should line up with the holes. There you go. Line them up, and that is so you don't crack the carbon fiber rod. Okay, so now we're gonna go for the linear rails. You don't need a lot of screws for this. You're gonna kind of want to go every other hole, and those rubber plugs you do not want to pull out. You're gonna have the intention, and I want to show you in a minute, because I had the same thoughts you guys are thinking, like, yeah, I can put the screw underneath and then put the plug on top. No, they don't stay in very good. And you want those plugs because if you take those plugs up and that rail goes off, all your bearings are gonna fall out. So that's to prevent from that block from coming off and falling out and having the bearings spill. Okay, so now once you've got your screws in, you've got your little V-nuts. You want to make sure they're lined up properly and they're all in carefully, and then you're going to get this special little C-clamp, and this is the thing to keep it perfectly aligned so it's not crooked and it's totally straight. So just clip that on the end. Once you got those things slipped on, it's good. Try to center as much as you can, and then you're going to want to get your screwdriver and start tightening up these rods. One screw at a time. First do one side, then do the other, so that way it doesn't shift. And just turn to, like, you know, they get like finger tight, and then you go later on, you go a little tighter. All right, so go there. Okay. You know, I'm doing this right now because I'm making sure that these V-nuts actually catch on, because if you do it wrong, they're just going to come out and they're going to tighten upon themselves. You know, they're going to come out of the extrusion slots. So you want to push it out, turn it back and forth until you actually feel that bite. If you don't feel that bite, do it again. Okay, so that's pretty smooth right there. And you can see I didn't move those rubber tips. Now here's a spacer on that Y gantry. And now I'm going to put that onto the block. Tighten that up with a couple of turns of my screwdriver. Okay, on this side over here, which is the right side, you can see the smooth pulley on top and the geared one on the bottom of the space underneath the spacer. You can see the reds on top and the black. I did that so you can see a little better. Actually, I couldn't really find the other color spacers, so I'm just saying that. All right, so it gets a little tricky because it's a little bit of an angle, but what you can get it in with your driver. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the other side. Okay, so now the pulley is on the up, facing away from you, and it's on the bottom, and the gear is on top, facing you, it's closest to you. And you make these tight. And that's good, okay? It's nice and smooth, good to go. And that's it. Okay, we're at the final part right now of the top gantry part, which is gonna be the carbon fiber X rod or square tube. We've got some holes in the front, as you can see. And we're gonna line them up with this linear rail. And we're gonna put the screws in the rails and put it in there and then tighten up with a nut driver. A couple of things first. These are Yusong linear rails. They're pretty cheap. They're about 20 bucks a pop versus the more expensive that go about 100. Now, you see this plastic plug here? Do not feel like you want to put a screw in here because there's a hole over there, because what's going to happen is that plug is not going to go back down, and then you may have a chance of spilling all your bearings if the block moves all the way to that end over there. This is a bumper guard, so your block does not come out and have all the beans spill out of it. That's the last thing you want during a print is your beans coming out of your block or bearings, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so let's line this up on top of the holes. And we're going to do that with the spacers that you print out. They come in the files. And you're going to put another one on the opposite side. Yeah, I know. There's no bumper on the end. Calm down, people. We'll take care of that right now. Okay? There. Right. So now we're going to line that hole up with the spacer. And then on the back, you can see there's bigger holes so you can actually fit your nut wrench or whatever you want to call a tool. Okay, so this looks pretty lined up. Okay, just double checking certain things over here. All right, good. Let's put a screw over here. And once you drop it in, it goes right in like that. I'm going to get my nut driver and I'm going to put my finger on the hole on the opposite side as I put this nut in and stop the screw from popping out. And I'm just going to get a loose little 1 or 2 turns over here until I get my nut screwdriver. And then I'm going to hold one side, and then I'm going to turn the nut driver and try to hold it into place. You can turn it whatever you want. That's fine. Anyway, as I was saying, it's definitely a good investment to get this carbon fiber square tubing because it's lighter than even any normal extrusion. It will go faster because it's lighter. We keep talking about the inertia. There's going to be less inertia than a heavier rod, and it's a lot lighter than the Pro Extrusion X rods. Okay, so I think this was about 30 bucks. My linear rails cost me about 20 a pop. You can go for the more expensive ones if you want for linear rails and pay like 80. I don't know what they go for, but I know they're really expensive. But these are Yusongs. I got it on Amazon. I definitely think there was like 2 for 40 or something like that. Definitely worth it. Okay, so now we're gonna put this in here, kind of tilt it to the side so we can get these holes lined up. And this block has to be lined up with the holes or else it's not going to work because this is the holes where the screws go into. And if it's not lined up, you could have some problems. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a screwdriver over here. Okay, here we go. All right, so push this in very carefully, very gently. I'm gonna do the same on the other side, just to make sure it's all lined up and my screw can go in. All right, so we're good. So I kind of like turn a little bit so this thing can fit at an angle, and then I'll pull it down and it should fit. Now I put 1 screw in and a 2nd screw, and then I'm going to tighten these down and then put a nut on the bottom of it so they stay secure and tight. Yeah. Technically, you could probably get away with just this, but you want to put a nut on the bottom of the screw just to make sure that it wiggles even less. Because if it's too loose, it's going to wiggle around, and you don't want that. You want this to be perfectly perpendicular across your x-axis and your y-axis. All right, do the same with the other one. Put some nuts, tighten them up as much as I can, and that's pretty easy. And we're almost done. Now, remember, these are Yusong linear rails. I'm going to let you know once we start printing how good they are. If they make a lot of noise or what. But they feel pretty good to me right now. And that's it for the Gantry. Okay? Smooth, smooth, smooth.